Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Juan Jose Quina, and I'm the brand strategist here at TimeXtender, and I'll be your host for this session. Today's session is all about defining and demystifying what building a data culture is all about. And to help us to do so, I'm joined by Jacqueline Blumen, Senior Analyst for Data and Analytics at BARC. Welcome, Jacqueline. Thank you for being with us today.
Hello, Juan. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm really keen on moving on in our discussion because I think the topic of data culture is one of the most exciting things in the data and analytics market space nowadays.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So obviously, we have framed this conversation, because I see this as a conversation, of course, as to basically illuminate and educate and basically demystify what is a data culture, but also how can organizations move from the framework of data-driven to data empowerment, which is something that we actually really believe in at TimeXtender. So just to start with and kick off things from the very basics. So what is your definition of data culture? And I'm assuming that this is a broad concept, so you will have to probably bring it down to different aspects of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the way you phrased the title, because there's all this discussion about being data driven, but being data driven somehow doesn't sound like something positive, because it sounds like something is pushing you somewhere and you don't really know where it's going to. And that's why I like data empowerment a lot more, because it says a lot more about really empowering the workforce to do things with data and analytics that's positive for the enterprise. So I really like that. But let me just, I brought some slides with me,
Sure.
and I thought I would share them. And there's this famous phrase about culture eating strategy for breakfast. And I think that's a good fit for data culture as well, because data culture eats data strategy for breakfast. And we see many enterprises very engaged in defining their data strategy and what kind of use cases do they want to approach and what kind of platform do they need to do that. But at the end of the day, if data culture is eating their data strategy for breakfast, then they probably won't really be successful. So data culture is something that is intangible. It's very hard to grasp. But indeed, at the end of the day, if you want to change the way people work, if you want to really achieve them to be empowered in data working, then you have to do, of course, data strategy is important, but data culture is even more important. And someone, a customer of ours, phrased it recently, and I really like that saying: culture, or data culture, is what remains when no one is looking. And I really like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the lasting effect. I was just thinking in the analogy from a marketing perspective. So it's what the brand is perceived after everybody has left the room, or it's basically your reputation after you have left the room. So I really like that analogy. I think it's fundamentally what we are aiming for, both internally at TimeXtender, but also generally speaking. I think everybody has to understand that data can be absorbed by everybody, can be implemented by everybody, and can be breathed by everybody. So, yeah, I think it's a great analogy, actually. Yeah. So, on that note, we touched base on the definition of data culture. I like the analogy that we have just discussed. How does data culture help companies, generally speaking? Because one thing is, the overall theme, the top funnel kind of definition, but what is the bottom line, or what are actually some of the good benefits of having a data culture, so to say?
You know, that's probably the most important question at all, because, you know, if I go up to my manager and say, well, we need a data culture, and managers, you know, they really want to have P&L outcomes. So they say, well, why do I need a culture? I mean, what for? How does it make my business better? And we actually asked that question on our latest survey on data culture. We asked companies which positive effects of a data culture they are actually striving for. And I think if we look just way down on the list, this little gray bar here, only 3% actually of companies that participated are not striving for a data culture. So it seems to be something relevant for a large majority of organizations, for 97%. But on the other hand, if we look at what they're striving for, the topmost chosen answer was improved decision making. And I think this is interesting because it's actually something we've been doing with traditional business intelligence since, I don't know, 25 years or something like that. And that's really hard to measure. And of course, when you go to your manager and want to achieve things, then managers like to achieve things that are measurable, right? And if we look further down the list, there are other options here too, like continuous process improvement or cost reduction or revenue growth, which are really things you can measure. So it's really getting down to numbers, getting down to a positive impact on your profit and loss. But there are other things, innovative things as well. For example, competitive advantage and development of new business models. And while these aren't that much in common among our respondents, what we actually see is that best-in-class organizations strive for these benefits a lot more than average. Now, you know what, I would be interested in what your clients are doing. Do you see them striving for these positive effects, or do you see a lot of them actually moving forward not only to positive P&L impact, but also to a competitive advantage?
I absolutely think that data is what we heard this a lot, which is the new oil. It's a very used analogy, I have to say, but all customers actually use TimeXtender in order to get instant access to data and also to democratize the access to the data in itself. So I think I can relate to the fact of the improved decision-making process. I think our customers will always be on that bucket for the most part. I'm curious to know actually, or to see that the cost reduction is actually on top of the revenue growth in terms of the category. Very interesting to see that they are aiming more to try to mitigate the spend. I would argue that in many occasions, depending on the industry, we see that as well, especially when it comes to supply chain and logistics or wholesome organizations. So yeah, I think it matches what we have seen in our marketplace as well. So excellent, and I just wanted to touch base on the fact that this is one of the latest surveys that you have released, which is obviously part of the core of this talk. So can you define a little bit what is basically the scope or the demographics of this survey? I can see that 433 people were surveyed. Are they based in different regions, in different countries, or?
This was indeed a worldwide survey, although of course, due to our location, we're based in Germany. Our answer base has a pretty large percentage of people participating in Europe, but we also have respondents from North America and also from Asia Pacific. And it's really interesting because if you do an analysis by region, I don't have the numbers with me today, but it's very apparent that in many cases, Europe is by trend lagging behind North America and sometimes even behind Asia. And that might be because of the fact that Asia it doesn't have that much legacy IT than maybe European and North American companies do. That's something that I kind of sometimes think about. Is this something that you're seeing in your customer bases as well?
TimeXtender is present in 95 countries at the moment. So, but we have a strong focus in Europe as well. And perhaps I think maybe it's a regulation thing. Maybe due to the regulations and the EU policies, data is a little bit more tricky to innovate in while being compliant at the same time. So obviously GDPR is one of the things that comes to mind. So it might be because of the regulations that we are lagging behind in innovation. But it's interesting that pops up as well in your own surveys, actually. So thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. Okay, let's move on to the next question, if that's okay, Jacqueline. So I touched base in the definition of that data culture. Then how can data culture actually help companies, which is great. How can you measure actually data culture? And I know it's very intangible. You just mentioned that in the definition actually, but there might be some components that we can tackle in order to try to measure our efforts, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, culture is difficult to measure, but I think you can kind of measure what you want to achieve because you're striving for a culture change because of things you want to achieve, as we just said. And so you can measure these things, but one of the KPIs that we've been monitoring throughout the years has been so asking our respondents about the fact, are their decisions based on data or gut feeling? Because, you know, everyone says that data is important, but are they really actively using data? And there's a certain trend here. If we look back at 2014, we see a large majority, 58%, saying that decisions are predominantly or purely based on experience or gut feeling. And we can also clearly see that there's a downward trend here. By 2020, it was only 21%, and it fell a little bit more in the past year. And we can likewise see that those that predominantly or purely data-based their decisions has been constantly rising. Although I think the figure with 34% in 2021 isn't really that high yet. So that's an indication for the fact that companies are in a transition travel but it seems they're struggling a little bit in really getting there. And we see that by other answers in our research as well. It's like, you know, getting to be data empowered is very, very difficult. And it's sometimes it makes you feel like when you're trying to reorganize your data flows and processes that you're running into a brick wall. And so what I think part of it is, though, that we really get the feeling that companies are getting pretty good on determining where they want to go. And even they have good ideas about how they can get there, but maybe they're not really clear on where they stand today and what are the most pressing issues. I often get the impression when companies speak about their data strategy that they think an awful lot about technology and about architecture, and these things are certainly very important. But I mean, we're speaking about culture, right? And culture isn't about technology. It's about a lot more things. And we often have spoken about data silos. I'm sure you speak with your customers about that too. But I mean, what are really data silos? Are they due to technology? Or are they more like just the outcome of business silos? The businesses actually built these data silos. So we kind of often analyze that it's the silos in the business that actually drive the data silos. So one of the first steps would be trying to help the organization and the different departments understand that the organization as a whole must transform, and that it's not enough just to look at your own department, but you have to break up your department silos and the silos perhaps in the heads of managers as well. What do you think? Is this something you're seeing with your customers too?
I suppose there has been a transition over the past few years. I'm not sure I can go back as far as 2014. I only entered the data space maybe a couple of years ago, but it's been super exciting to see. But one of the things that we said in TimeXtender is part of a culture, actually, and it falls into the data culture, if you like, is that our core purpose is to empower the world with data, mind, and heart. Data, of course, the definition is already there. Mind is the intuition and the experience that is mentioned in this specific survey. And heart is the passion to drive the business forward, of course. So it's something that we think about all the time. And obviously, our partners actually think about the same procedure and the same motto. So I think it's there. I think people have a tendency to kind of relay in their own experience often. But I think it's becoming more predominant to think about data first and then making the decision based on that. So I think the trend is super clear, actually, both in anecdotal data, but also in the graph that you have put forward, actually. So thanks for that. So obviously, these are excellent data points, and it's excellent to see. But in terms of implementing data culture, so what are the 5 kind of most important things that you should consider when you start that journey? And it's a journey, right? So everybody has to go through that. It's not an easy one. So you mentioned that silos, and I think everybody kind of starts looking at, are my teams talking to one another? Are they asking the right questions to one another? So maybe we could start with that, but obviously I'm super looking forward to see what you come up with in terms of those 5 strategic steps.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important to realize that data strategy is important, but just as important is data culture, and that you need both, and that you need a couple of other things as well. And to kind of structure this a little bit, we developed a data culture framework, and it actually has 6 pillars, and one of them is data strategy. Data strategy, of course, should link into your business strategy, because of course you're doing this to develop your business. So that's really important, and it's important to realize that your data strategy is not just about technology, as we just said, but then there are other things that you need to focus on as well. And data governance, for example, is something that it comes to mind very fast. Although even though the term is a little bit negative for many people because it's about restricting things, but data governance shouldn't really be about restricting things, but enabling the organization to work on their data strategy goals and to achieve them. So data governance for me is kind of the organizational and process implementation of your data strategy. So the implementation of things that really help you change the way you work with data and analytics. And while it's important, of course, to live up to the GDPR laws that are in place, especially in Europe, of course, you still want to be able to work with your data in a way that really helps you. So there, you kind of have to achieve the right balance there. But the other topics here, data literacy, of course, people have to be skilled in using data and analytics. Sometimes it's interpreted as everyone having to be a data scientist, but I think that's not
Right.
true, right? Because I mean, think about the people that work on the operational processes. They might not be directly working with analytics at all, but still, for example, they have to understand the data they're producing, that's needed to actually base decisions on data further down the data lifecycle chain. And so you have to help them become aware of the fact that what they are doing is very important from a data point of view, and that they have to realize what benefit lies in the data they are producing in the future. And that really doesn't have anything to do with data science at all. So that also means I have to communicate to them. And of course, I have to enable data access. We hear a lot from customers that say, well, I can't even find the data that I don't even know what data is there. So how can I really come up with some creative ideas about all the things I can do with data? And then the other part on the top, perhaps often the most important part, and that many executives don't realize, you need data leadership. And that's important, especially when you think about the transition, when you think about the cultural change. It won't happen by itself. You have to support it. You have to lead yourself. You have to lead by example. And you have to, as the executive level, you have to support the organization in this cultural change. Is there anything you are missing here, or are these things that you would say, yeah, they apply to your customers as well? I would really like to hear some feedback.
I think many of the things resonate, and I think it has to come from the leadership, like you just mentioned. So again, it's all about expanding a little bit the data literacy of a team or a couple of teams. Marketeers have a tendency to look into the numbers very closely. We like our numbers, we like our CTRs, we like our conversion rates, but not every department is the same. However, when you start that conversation, when you start asking the right questions and trying to put a number on things, I think that works really, really well. It's a question of demonstrating value at the end of the day. So identifying what works, what doesn't, things like that. And I think internally, we have processes established in order to do so, and we keep iterating, but also we see that in the kind of questions and projects that are put forward by our partners and our customers. So I think having a framework like this is super helpful, of course. Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. And I'm gonna probably this is the flip side of the coin, right? So we have the 5 or some of the important elements that we can put forward following this data culture framework, for example. What are the obstacles, actually? And you might have touched in a couple of, but what do you think are the biggest obstacles just to actually embrace these type of frameworks and this culture?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because only if you know where the problems lie, you can really address them. Of course, we asked this question in our survey as well. And we had a whole list of answer options, but I think the top 4 really stand out. And it's about resources. So it seems that the priorities, even though everyone is saying that data is so important and I want to become data empowered, apparently it isn't important enough, because not enough resources are there to actually strengthen data and analytics. 44% agreed here. And then there's a lack of knowledge. So that's the topic of literacy. Seems we're not addressing that in a sufficient manner, but also lack of roles and responsibilities assigned around data, and a lack of internal communication. And I think that really transports that that we haven't really understood what it means to actually work on this change. That data must be really, I mean, it's really a phrase that we've heard so often, that data must be handled as an asset. But still, I hear from business leaders still these days, yes, but IT should manage that. IT should take care of data because it's something technical. But of course, if we look at these answers here, it seems that's not true. And I actually tend to say, well, data is business. Data is the digital implementation or the digital representation of the business. So sure, it has to be stored somewhere, and that's technical, but the content itself is purely business. And it's something that has to be reflected in responsibilities and the way we speak about data, and the way we speak about the usage of data and the benefits of data for the business. What do you think? Do you see your customers having these issues as well, or would you see others that might even be more important?
I was just reading the whole list, actually, Jacqueline, and one of the things that pops up, and even though it's not the top 4, but is our data strategy is purely a technology strategy. And that's fairly interesting. So obviously, some of the businesses that you have surveyed have put a lot of measurements in terms of technology, but they haven't actually done the foundation, which is interesting to see. And I think it's because, especially I think over the past 5 years, some people have gone through that mentality of digital transformation, and I have to accomplish this as quickly as possible. So I throw technology to a problem that obviously needs a different approach. So I think I can see that. But one of the things that I also wanted to comment on is the lack of knowledge among employees about data and analytics. I think it's a follow-up question, actually. Do you think that the low-code approach of certain technologies, I'm mentioning TimeXtender for obvious reasons, but it's not the only one, has the potential, actually, to mitigate that specific the indicator, if you like?
Oh, Juan, really, that's an excellent question, because with the big data era that we've been seeing in the last years, and the transformation towards utilizing a lot more open source software has been actually a transformation back to a lot of coding. And I guess this is like a wave that comes and goes. The wave coming from writing a lot of code and then moving away from it again and then going back again. And I actually think we at BARC really strongly believe that a data-empowered organization is an organization where business users can use data and analytics themselves without being dependent on IT and without having to write code. And as you said, yes, there are already a lot of solutions out there in the marketplace that enable that. And we think there will be a lot more transition towards even smarter solutions in the years upcoming. So that means a lot more of automation, a lot more of enhancement, a lot more smartness in the tools to actually support the business users in becoming more efficient and more effective. So yes, absolutely, I would totally agree.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of lack of internal communication about data and analytics, could you give me an example about a company, or you don't have to name them, of course, but about this specific indicator, right? So what is it that companies are not doing in terms of communication throughout data and analytics at the moment? What are the best examples that you can think of? A couple of them, I suppose.
I think one of the most apparent things that could be done and that aren't being done enough is speaking about the positive value that data can have for the business and towards people that aren't aware of it. Now, we were just speaking about those people that are working on the operational business processes and perhaps using the ERP or the CRM system. So those are the employees that are actually producing data, but they don't realize the value of the data further downstream. They don't know enough about all these innovative use cases that other people in the enterprise are working on. Mm-hmm. And they don't really have a good feeling or a good understanding of what is limiting these people to actually implement these new ideas. And it's very, very, very important to communicate towards them, to show them the business value of the data, which questions can be answered, which things can be achieved for the business if the data is there, in sufficient quality. So motivating them to really generate good data and telling them, making them aware of the fact that they are very important. And of course that has something to do with motivation, with positive feeling, with really getting excited about data and analytics. I think that's one of the easiest things that you can actually start doing, and that would really make a big difference.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I was just obviously the top one is resource allocation is generally insufficient. So do you think that this is more, we see that hiring, specifically engineering positions is becoming more and more demanding, and there is not as many engineers in the market as possible. Do you think is that one of the drivers, or is just company policy, not company policy, but company decision not to invest as heavily in that type of resources? I'm not sure if you can comment on that.
That's a difficult question to give a straight answer to, because there are different facets to it. Like, there's one approach that says, oh, let's just reach out to the marketplace and just add additional resources, just staff a lot of data scientists. But at the end of the day, that won't really help. Because if you want to start becoming data empowered, you need people that understand the business. Of course, in some cases, you'll need a data scientist or a data engineer, but I think the most important part of it is understanding the business and being creative about what you can positively change around the business to make the enterprise more efficient, more effective, or even to innovate the business. And so you'll need your experienced workforce for this. But managers tend to, leave the priorities on, I like to say, operational excellence. And that's also the way they are usually led by the executive level. Each business department should be excellent about the operational business they run. But there's not really incentive around being overly innovative, and so it's actually just very, very, very apparent that they tend to prioritize their resources and their experienced business workers in operational in operational excellence rather than in innovation. And this is really something to think about a little bit more, and to see that's also about data leadership. Perhaps define incentives for mid-level managers to perhaps define other priorities in their workforce, and to free up some of the very experienced business experts to actually work on innovation as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it comes back to some of the things that you have mentioned in terms of, data automation and kind of freeing up the time that technology allows you to do so, in order for those resources actually to be more strategic, more planning ahead, more forecasting potential value that specific set of data is going to bring, while the technology takes care of the automation and the digestion of that data. So
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So moving on, and we touched in a framework, right? So we touched in a framework that you have defined with 6 specific pillars. What are the individual pillars that could be correlated to that, if you like? How can companies move from data-driven, which is basically the buzzword of the last couple of years, to data empowerment, right? So what are your suggestions on that angle?
Well, we briefly touched on that a couple of minutes ago, saying that, of course, it's important to realize where I want to go, but it's also important to realize where I stand. And there are actually a lot of things we can do just to make the current status quo transparent to everyone. So, of course, it's about communication, but it's also about data access, giving more information about the data landscape, about defining responsibilities so that I know who to ask when I have a certain question. I think the very first step is really about transparency and about about communication. And of course, it is equally important to understand, of course, where you want to go. You need a data strategy, and it should include more than just technology. It should be about business goals and where I want to be in 3 to 5 years, with the help of data and analytics. And of course, it's also very important, and I think, like, I think that's really right what you pointed out before about a data strategy being purely about a technology, and because of the fact that business likes to push data strategy over to IT, sometimes the initiatives we start tend to be a little bit over-engineered, so IT is doing too much of a good job, and it's not making things better, but it's just making things even more difficult to understand for business. And also, these initiatives tend to be a little bit too centralized, but being a data-empowered organization is about data democracy. So it's not about having data and analytics centralized. It's about exactly the opposite. It's about having data and analytics being decentralized. And while, of course, this is a journey, as all we have spoken about, these two factors, I think, too, are something to be very, very careful about. Don't over-engineer, and don't overly centralize, but rather speak with your customers, which are the business users, and really, find a way that really helps them achieve more with data and analytics. So does that make sense, or do you see other things as well?
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And in terms of data democratization, sorry, is a term that takes me a while to pronounce. I think giving access to data, of course, with the right level of governance, which is something that you have mentioned before, is fundamentally one approach that could be beneficial for any organization. And in order to do that, of course, you need technology. Nobody's arguing the opposite. It's actually very beneficial to have it. But having giving access to your employees to the right level of data so they can ask the right questions is going to end up in a positive effect for your business, of course. So thanks for that, Jacqueline. I have another question, and this is more kind of a competition question. So I would like to know which kind of regions and industries are basically leading. And I think you mentioned at the beginning a couple of things. Europe not being necessarily the best position right now. But what regions or industries are leading in terms of data culture right now, according to your research? Yeah.
Yeah, that's also very interesting to look at. Thanks for the question. So in our survey, we asked which positive effects of a data culture the companies have achieved so far. And we see the average numbers here on the bars. So the topmost was indeed improved decision-making. We spoke about that before, 50%. But there are some industries that have achieved that at a much higher rate. And top of the list is retail with 75%. And I think this reflects very well that especially retail is on the transformation to being online, digital, selling over multi-channels. And I think this is a huge driver for actually becoming data empowered. But it's also, well, the second highest rate was with banking and finance, which might first come to your mind when you think about being most successful at becoming data empowered. But even the second the second highest rated positive effect with the cost reduction through the use of data, again, top of the list is retail with 69%. And then interestingly, I think, I think you wouldn't tend to think that the public sector is very innovative around data, but apparently they're overly successful at improving their processes with 44% compared to 38% on average. Now that, of course, might be due to the fact that the processes in the public sector are more improvement worthy than other industries, but I don't know, that's just a thought there. So yeah, so how about your customers? Do you see a kind of trend in the industries you sell to as well?
I think this really resonates with us. Wholesale and supply chain have been basically on that bucket for a long time, and I think I mentioned that at the beginning of our chat. So, and in terms of cost reduction, absolutely, I think retail and wholesale are actually looking at that. We can see that in many of our customer stories. Actually, if you visit our website, you will see that it kind of clearly resonates. I just have a definition question, if you don't mind me asking. But retail, would you actually bucket within retail e-commerce, purely e-commerce organizations, or do you separate retail and e-commerce from your service? And if you cannot answer that right now, that's absolutely fine. I was just curious.
Yeah, we don't ask the question so fine-grained. So we have just this category that would include, of course, both. Which is what I was kind of interpreting, because e-commerce is included, the rate is probably this high. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that every retail industry has to become digital and multi-channel moving forward, because if they don't become that, they'll probably be out of business. And I think that's something that that the pandemic actually fueled.
Yeah.
There are numbers on this that actually prove that consumers are buying more and more online instead of really going into a store.
Yeah. Even in small businesses here in Denmark, where I live right now, I could see during the pandemic and after the pandemic that they have digitalized their services. So if you are a restaurant and you want to sell your food during a dramatic period as it was the last 2 years, what do? You pull up a website and you start receiving orders by the website and delivering, which is amazing to see the speed of transformation actually. So,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, last two questions, Jacqueline. I know we are running out of time, and I don't want to take much more from you. But so once the data strategy is in place, what kind of technologies would you suggest to adopt in order to drive those strategies, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at our trend monitor. And we ask this question every year. We ask our participants, which are basically in a majority from end user companies, to rate the current trends and how important they are. And I just pulled out the top 10 here just to give you an impression. And there are both organizational trends on the list as well as technology trends. And again, here we see that the organizational trends are just thought to be a lot more important than the actual technical trends. There are some things like real-time analytics that has actually gone down since 2018 from number 6 down to number 9, 2022, or things like alerting. But I think there are very interesting things here that say, so master data and data quality management, which of course you can support by technology, but is basically an organizational issue, has been rated top 1 for the past 5 years.
Right.
And we see that data-driven culture and data governance have grown in importance very clearly in the past years. And on the other hand, while self-service analytics and data discovery are still important, they have fell a little bit in importance. And I read the graphic that's because the users are becoming more and more clear on the fact that data-driven culture and data governance and good data quality are much more important than actually having the self-service tools. Although, on the other hand, and that's something, of course, we can't read out of the graphic here, we do an awful lot of analysis on self-service and how well it's working and how and where it needs improvement. And I think the factor we had touched on before about being low code, no code, and let me just add to that, being really usable for a business user is something that is actually that is actually not that's making it more difficult to really have self-service analytics available to a broad user basis. We hear again and again that the solutions that are built don't really service the user's need and that it takes too long to change it. So this is actually really a reason to think a little bit more harder about what are the right tools to give to the workforce and to really realize what their needs are. And it's often not, I mean, these centralized approaches often come to their limits because they're so it's so slow to establish them. It's so slow to change them. So again, let's use the word democratization. It's a lot more about decentralizing analytics, but doing it in a way that is really usable for the actual end users, and that means understanding what their needs are. And again, over engineering is not the right option here. It's more about really being easy to use and being understandable. And I'm sure you guys at TimeXtender are basically saying the right story, because that's how I understand your story is about, and your story about being data empowered. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you for the mention. But obviously, our goal is to simplify, automate everything that can be automated, and execute the business goals as quickly and as efficient as possible. And obviously, I'm a TimeXtender ex-people or an employee. And what can I say? Of course, our goal is to simplify as much as possible the life of others. Is in our core purpose. And we are aiming for that. Just a couple of mentions here. Data warehouse modernization, which is part of obviously what we do at TimeXtender, has been studied for many years. So to me, that read like is a must-have, and it's going to stay there for as long as possible, I suppose. And then the funny thing that I noticed is in the data preparation by business users has been dropping and dropping and dropping over the past few years, which is very interesting to see. And I had a conversation with a partner recently, and they say that business users are less demanding than they used to be. And I had that conversation just a couple of weeks ago, whereas analytics is actually kind of a self-service program in many of the applications that are being implemented in the organizations. I read that there are 160 different software as a service applications running in small medium organizations, which is incredible, of course.
Yes.
But yeah, very interesting graph. Thank you for that. Last question, and then we'll wrap up. And this is more for you, knowing what you know, being in your position and talking to so many businesses in a constant basis. What data technology trends do you see over the next couple of years, if you like?
It's really, I really like to use the word automation again, because it's really, I mean, we all know that data can be very complex and very time consuming. I mean, there's this factor about 80% of the work effort is just preparing data. And this figure has been constant throughout all the last decades. So it's really this part of it that we have to make easier and faster. And it has to become less technical. And so it's about automating as much of the data and analytics process as possible, and also automating the generation of data information that I can offer to the users. So that's a lot about how do I generate metadata? How do I compile metadata so it's readable by a business user? And of course, it's also about enhancing tools with artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually learn from the metadata that's there to actually enable the automation, right? It's about having smart tools. It's about having self-learning tools to actually enable the process to be automated and therefore to be faster and less error prone. So I think that's really the way we're going. And we see a lot of, an awful lot of technology vendors like yourselves working exactly in this direction. Would you say it's the same for you?
Well, what can I say, Jacqueline? It's our bread and butter. So trying to make it as easy as possible to automate things and then liberate the human spirit, if you like, so we can do greater things. I think that's a great purpose. And I know my CEO, Heine, is very adamant to have this done. and to automate. And he keeps saying this as a mantra: automate everything that can be automated. Let's do that. So, yeah, I think those trends are fundamentally something that we are working towards. So, with that said, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Jacqueline. I have so much knowledge that before I started this session, so that's always a good thing. I hope our listeners are also happy to engage in this conversation and engage in data culture and ask their leaders and the different teams to contribute to this movement, if you like. So with that said, obviously I'm hosting on behalf of TimeXtender. If you want to check our website, please go to TimeXtender.com. Again, goes for Jacqueline. Check BARC research. They have tons of analyst reports that could be beneficial for your organization to see trends and trend spotting. So that's it. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Have a great day. And
you too,
hope
Juan.
to speak to you soon.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.